This adoption of atheism that you had when you arrived at university, was that just something that, because that was the environment you grew up in, was it something you'd consciously sort of decided on at some point?
It was a thought-through position. I had read widely as a teenager, and I come to the view atheism was right, that it was the future, and it was not as if it was just sort of way going with the cultural mood, although at that time the cultural mood was moving in that direction. It was much more my individual consideration. This is the best way of making sense of things. Atheism is the only intellectual option, and that, as far as I was concerned, was the end of the discussion.
When Lewis converted, he famously described himself as the most reluctant convert in all of England. What was your experience of the lights coming on in that way? Was there the same sense of, oh my goodness, this is really true, or did you embrace it wholeheartedly?
I think, well, first of all, it was unexpected. I did not expect this to happen. But it wasn't quite the sort of experience Lewis had. It was more sort of gradual crystallization of realization that actually this isn't right and this is. And so I can't really put a date when I moved from one to the other. It's much more just a growing realization that I had made a mistake, but a correctable mistake. And in effect, that I would be able to move away and embrace something. And the criterion was the same, what makes most sense of things. My conversion was actually very intellectual. It was basically, this is the best way of making sense of things. And obviously that meant that I had a rather rational view of Christianity to begin with, although of course it was enriched as I went on. But certainly for me, Christianity was a sense-making template, if you like, something that really helped me to make sense of what life was all about.
Yeah. You went there to study biology, biochemistry, and so on. And in a sense, many people, and you would be a contemporary of someone like Richard Dawkins in a similar field at Oxford University, have come to the conclusion that, well, science simply is the de facto explanation for why we're here, why things are the way they are. And they very much see that as something replacing religious explanations. That's certainly the way someone like Dawkins would see it. Why did you not come to that conclusion yourself?
Because I felt that, although I hadn't read Dawkins at that time, I felt that kind of reductive explanation, which obviously I knew from people like Bertrand Russell, in effect was saying science fills in part of a picture, and what it fills in is all that we can know. And I began to realize actually that was not true. Science had its limits, that actually there were insights that we could have that came from outside science. And therefore the scientific, scientific way of thinking about life was to be welcomed, but it was not the full picture. It was in effect only part of a bigger picture. And therefore I began to realize there was a need to tell the full story, to see the full picture of which science was only a part. And therefore there are 2 points that really I found very, very important intellectually. One was, if science fills in one part and faith fills in another part, how do they interact? Okay? But secondly, and much more importantly, the realization that science is not of ultimate significance. It tells us something that's important, but it only does it at one level. And so for me, religion is not about contradicting scientific explanation. It's saying there is more that needs to be said. There is an extra layer of interpretation which science, for its own good reasons, does not want to bring into the picture.
This is Premier Christian Radio.